Welcome to the Maryland 4-H Volunteer Refresher Training. This training is required annually for certified UME 4-H volunteers. This training is intended to help you be prepared and protected as you serve the 4-H program in the coming year. If you have questions about the information presented in this training or about other topics related to your service as a 4-H volunteer, please contact your local 4-H educator. As a 4-H volunteer, you are expected to represent the Maryland 4-H program with professionalism and integrity. You are the face of 4-H to the families who participate in our programs and to your community. As such, you have a responsibility to model the positive behaviors expected of 4-H participants and to avoid prohibited behaviors. Maryland 4-H volunteers must understand, follow, and enforce the Maryland 4-H Code of Conduct. You were provided the current Code of Conduct when you enrolled, and you agreed to follow its standards. Your 4-H educator can provide a printed copy of the Maryland 4-H Code of Conduct, or it can be found on the Maryland 4-H website. 4-H volunteers must support and observe the University of Maryland's policy on non-discrimination. They must actively foster an environment where all individuals feel welcome and included regardless of their race, ethnicity, gender identity, appearance, beliefs, national origin, or other personal characteristics or beliefs. University of Maryland programs are expected to be a safe space that is free from harassment of any type. This includes discriminatory harassment, sexual harassment, bullying or physical harassment, online harassment via social media or other electronic platforms, and any action taken in retaliation for reporting of harassment. If you experience, witness, or are told about harassment that is taking place, immediately report it to your local 4-H educator. 4-H volunteers are expected to handle sensitive information such as medical, financial, or personal data as private and confidential and not use or share it outside the requirements of their volunteer duties. 4-H volunteers must avoid the appearance of or actual conflict of interest. Volunteers may not promote private or personal interest in connection with their 4-H volunteer duties. Volunteers are prohibited from using alcohol or drugs, including cannabis, during UME or 4-H programming or events. 4-H volunteers are strongly discouraged from smoking, vaping, or using tobacco products in the presence of 4-H youth members. If you have any questions about these expectations or any of the 4-H policies or procedures that outlines them, contact your 4-H educator. Certified UME 4-H volunteers are authorized to provide care, custody, and control of youth in place of a parent or a guardian. Youth protection is the single most important responsibility of a 4-H volunteer. Maryland 4-H policies, procedures, risk management protocols, and trainings help ensure 4-H volunteers have all the tools and support they need to carry out their important roles. They also help protect 4-H volunteers if something should go wrong. The best thing you can do as a 4-H volunteer to ensure you're protected while you work with youth is to know, follow, and enforce Maryland 4-H policies and procedures. In addition to Maryland 4-H rules and guidelines, 4-H volunteers have protections under state law. Through the Maryland Tort Claims Act, the state of Maryland protects volunteers from legal liability when they perform their volunteer duties conscientiously and as assigned. The Maryland Tort Claims Act does not protect volunteers who cause harm by being negligent or by acting intentionally or maliciously. To be protected under the Maryland Tort Claims Act while you work as a 4-H volunteer, you must perform the duties and responsibilities outlined in your volunteer service description, take proper care and caution to manage risks to the best of your ability, and display a professional and conscientious attitude. If you have questions about your legal protections under the Maryland Tort Claims Act, contact your Maryland 4-H educator. 4-H volunteers are expected to follow Maryland 4-H policies regarding supervision of and contact with youth. These practices apply in all situations where adults interact with youth engaged in 4-H programs, events, or activities. 4-H volunteers should follow the principle of two-deep supervision. This means there are at least 2 adult certified UME 4-H volunteers and/or 4-H educators leading or supervising any 4-H activity. 4-H volunteers should always observe the adult-to-youth supervision ratio required by Maryland 4-H policy. For most 4-H events, the minimum ratio is at least 1 adult volunteer for every 10 youth participants ages 8 to 18. For Cloverbuds aged 5 to 7, the supervision requirement is 1 adult for every 5 children. 4-H volunteers should avoid being alone with youth. If it is absolutely necessary for you to interact one-on-one with a 4-H'er, try to do so in an area where others can visually observe or hear the interaction. Volunteers should also avoid communicating one-on-one with youth via text messages, email, social media messages, or phone calls. Any verbal or electronic communication between an adult and a youth should always include another adult. 4-H volunteers are strongly discouraged from transporting non-family youth in their personal vehicles when traveling to or from 4-H events. While this practice is not prohibited, 4-H volunteers should understand that their volunteer status does not provide them any personal liability protection. Transporting youth is not a duty assigned in your volunteer service description. Therefore, you will not be protected by the Maryland Tort Claims Act if an accident or other tragic event places you at risk of liability. You can choose to transport non-family youth to and from 4-H events in your personal vehicle. However, you should be aware that you solely assume all risks and any claims would be made against your personal insurance policies. If you choose to transport non-family youth to and from a 4-H event in your personal vehicle, it is strongly recommended you obtain written permission from 4-H'er's family or guardian. Your 4-H educator can provide a form for this purpose. The form is for your personal record and does not need to be submitted to your local 4-H office. All certified UME 4-H volunteers are mandated reporters of suspected child abuse and neglect under Maryland law. This means that if you have any reason to suspect a minor may have been abused or neglected by someone, including a parent or family member, you are obligated to report your suspicions. You are required to report suspected child abuse or neglect when you observe an act of child abuse or neglect, you observe signs of potential child abuse or neglect, even if you did not witness the act. You are told of child abuse or neglect by another person who has direct knowledge. You are told by a victim that they were abused or neglected as a child, regardless of their age. You are told about past abuse by an adult. Remember, as a 4-H volunteer, you are legally obligated to report suspected child abuse or neglect. You are also legally protected for performing this required duty. Under the Maryland law, any individual who in good faith reports suspected child abuse or neglect is immune from criminal prosecution or civil liability for their actions. If you observe any person physically or sexually abusing a minor, you should immediately contact law enforcement by calling 911. Be prepared to answer the dispatcher's questions about the location where the abuse is occurring and what you are witnessing. If you learn about or suspect child abuse or neglect in a non-emergency situation, you must report within 48 hours of learning of it. You are not required or encouraged to gather more information ask questions, or investigate. Just report your knowledge or suspicion when you become aware of it. If you have reason to suspect a youth present at a 4-H activity has been abused or neglected, contact the local Child Protective Service agency to make a report. As soon as reasonably possible, notify your 4-H educator who will help you complete a 4-H incident report. Follow the direction of the CPS officer and your 4-H educator regarding next steps. Information about suspected child abuse or neglect is highly sensitive. Details and reports are considered private and confidential. Do your best to protect the privacy of involved individuals and limit information to those who have a need to know. If you have questions or concerns about the reporting process or what will happen next, talk to your 4-H educator. When we look at the heart of successful youth development, we find two critical pillars: a deep sense of belonging and the power of consistent relationship building. As Maryland 4-H volunteers, our impact starts with being responsible role models. By showing our youth that we are genuinely invested in their health and overall well-being, we create the safe environment they need to grow. On this slide, you'll find resources in the form of articles. These articles are your starting point, and there are many other articles and other resources that are available to you. By building relationships and providing the youth with a sense of belonging, you're helping Maryland youth become beyond ready for their future. To continue to work as a certified UME 4-H volunteer, you must have an approved enrollment in 4-H Online. Before approving your enrollment, your 4-H educator will verify that you have completed all steps of the enrollment process and your UME background check is current and meets the requirements of the volunteer role you want to perform. If your background check will expire during this program year, you will need to renew it before your enrollment can be approved. You'll be notified if you need to renew your background check this year. To continue serving as a 4-H volunteer without interruption, your enrollment must be approved before March 1st. If your enrollment is not approved by March 1st of the current year, you must pause your volunteer work until it is approved. Contact your 4-H educator if you have questions about this requirement or if you need to arrange supervision for your club or group while your service is paused. There are several 4-H volunteer roles that must be appointed by a 4-H educator. If you want to serve as a 4-H overnight event chaperone, a 4-H fair superintendent, or as a member of a 4-H board or committee, contact your local 4-H educator. They can explain the appointment process and help you complete any required actions. As a representative of the University of Maryland Extension 4-H Youth Development Program, you are essential to our mission of creating a safe, supportive, and inclusive environment for all youth where they can learn, grow, and thrive. Thank you for the time and effort you've dedicated to serving Maryland youth and families through the 4-H program. Best wishes for another great 4-H year.